Hello and welcome to another remembering episode of Pittsburgh Sports Memories. I'm your co-host Steve Wirt. As usual, I'm joined by,
I'm Tim Hannon.
and today we're going to remember a rivalry that I'm sure people that are on the older side will remember, but some of you younger folks probably won't. That would be the Steelers Oilers slash Titans rivalry. And as I dug into this doing the research for this podcast, man, you forget how like rich this rivalry was and how many great games there were. I mean, from the briefcase game, the good old Commander Cody Carlson. I'm sorry, Tim, we have to talk about it. It's gonna be some maybe it'll be therapeutic discussing that one. And I mean, this was a great rivalry, and it's a shame we don't play them every year. But I mean, there's a good reason why we don't. So, rather than going through this chronologically, I kind of broke it up into three different eras because I think this rivalry really had three different distinct eras, and so they will be the golden era, and that's from 1975 to 1980. The jerk Oilers from 1985 to roughly 1993. There might be some overlap in there. And the Jeff Fisher, Bill Cowher era from 1994 to 2002. So we will start with our favorite. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this one, Tim. The jerk Oilers. And boy, were they a bunch of jerks, huh?
Yes.
As Tim said, this is when Tim became to hate this team, huh? This is the one that did it to you, huh?
Yeah. This was the era that, like I said, I despised so much this team.
So basically the Steelers and the Oilers are kind of both off their heyday, and they're both mediocre. They're not bad teams, but they're not definitely not competing necessarily for Super Bowls or anything. But they're good enough to make the playoffs and definitely some very memorable games. A big reason for this was a coach named Jerry Glanville. What he did do was he got the Oilers back to being competitive. They had kind of had some down years there after their big run in the 70s. And the Astrodome actually becomes known as the House of Pain during this era. And there is a rumor on the internet that it wasn't just from the hard hitting defense. It was because I guess they would turn the sound system up so loud it would hurt your ears. So that comes into play later in this podcast. Another person that got the Oilers back to competition was a quarterback named Warren Moon, and he was I think is he in the NFL Hall of Fame? If he isn't, he's gonna be. Um, he had played at Washington, had played in the Rose Bowl, and got snubbed by the NFL, and so he went to the Canadian Football League and absolutely was a superstar there for the Edmonton Eskimos. Um, and so then in the 80s, I think it was 84, 85, he decided he was going to come to the NFL. And Houston, to their credit, Bud Adams actually outbid a couple other teams because they knew Warren Moon was going to be good. So, Tim, would you say Warren Moon's best quarterback in Oilers Titans history?
It's it's really
I,
tough.
I mean,
Um
it's him, McNair, Kerry Collins. Yeah, yeah, I don't.
Tannehill.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
the
it's
big drop
definitely
off from him, McNair.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I think the three eras you're going to talk about all have like a signature Houston quarterback, and those are your top three.
yeah.
We'll talk a little bit more about McNair later. Probably Moon is, but boy, when you talk about McNair, I have some things to say there because he was just so impressive. But so was Moon. Like the NFL Films has this great piece that they did on him. It might have been like one of those football life things, but people talked about when he threw the ball, it like made a sound. It was like this, whoosh, like this
Yeah.
whipping sound. And then they would play clips of it from like NFL films, and it seriously like he threw the ball that hard. He had a
They could
really
pick it up
amazing arm.
with the microphones.
Yeah,
Wow.
you could hear the ball like whizzing through the air when he threw it. It's so yeah, he was a very very good quarterback.
So the Steelers, for their part, they had Mark Malone. His highlight was beating the 49ers that one time, and he had a 90-yard TD reception in 1981. So I think that's still like the 6th or 7th longest touchdown reception in Steeler history. So he's got that. Bubby Brister later in this era, who probably Bubby Brister's biggest highlight was, do you remember this, Tim? Not going into a game after when Neil O'Donnell got pulled.
Yeah,
Or that was
against the
they were getting
Oilers.
that was against Houston. They were
Yeah,
getting blown out, and
yeah.
Bubby was like, "Nope, not doing it, not going in."
What was his quote?
I don't mop up for anybody.
That's right.
He's not no mop up quarterback. So back to people that are in the Hall of Fame. That would be Rod Woodson, who was a Hall of Fame cornerback. Now he didn't come in really till 86, 87. So, but that's right in this era. And of course, Chuck Noll, the Hall of Fame and Super Bowl coach, is still the coach of the Steelers at this point because the Steelers change coaches less often than the popes change. Um, so one of the big things that happened during this was like Jerry Glanville coached a very, I say this, physical defense too.
Loose
Did
with
you
the
call it
rolls.
physical defense?
Yeah. I would call it a loose with the rolls defense.
Well, I remember one of Jerry Glanville's great quotes was there was a ref, I guess, wasn't calling it long. He said, NFL stands for not for long, the way you're calling it.
Yeah, that's right.
So Jerry, like I said, so obviously a very physical game, and the Oilers and Steelers are playing in Houston, and the Steelers needed to win. I think this is during the 1987 season, and the Steelers were 8-5, and they needed a win to help secure their playoff standing. So I guess the Oilers are doing Oiler type things, hitting people borderline, maybe getting called, maybe not, just being rough and just out of hand. So this is now to describe Chuck Noll, Tim, would you say stoic? Doesn't say a lot, doesn't really get into like talking matches with opposing players.
Yeah, stoic.
Yeah.
You're right. Doesn't get real up or down. Like
Yeah.
even if the Steelers have like a last second touchdown and the rest of the team jumping up and down, Chuck Noll's just kind of like, okay, let's kick the extra point. Like that's his demeanor on game day, right?
Yes, yeah, and that just kind of sets up how like out of character for it. So it must have been pretty bad, at least in Chuck Noll's opinion. So this is a direct quote from Chuck Noll. Number 24, he's yelling to one of the Oilers players, "Tell your coach, obviously Jerry Glanville, I'm going to meet him after the game and kick his butt." I guess I'm sure he did not say butt. Noll said the Oilers cornerback Steve Brown. And then he followed that up with, that wasn't good enough for Chuck Noll. He said, "Who do you think is going to win?" And the corner, Steve Brown for the Oilers, replied, "My money is on you, coach."
Nice.
So, this led to a obviously a handshake at the end of the game that was not too cordial.
And it's so great that someone caught that on camera, because how often are you going to get that? Like, you could see them maybe getting the shot of it, but having the audio, somebody actually got the audio of that. And I wonder how many times something like that happened in the 20 plus years Chuck Noll was coach. Probably that might be the only time.
And that's kind of how it went with the Jerry Glanville teams. A lot of cheap shots, a lot of fights, a lot of stuff going on, which will maybe make some of these other things that happen a little more satisfying for you, huh, Tim?
Yes.
Well, before we get to the satisfying stuff, let's get to the not so fun stuff. Tim, where were you in 1990 for the Cody Carlson game?
Yeah. So it was a Sunday night game.
It was in Houston, wasn't it?
It was in
Yeah.
Houston. So
Yeah.
I was watching it in the family room of our house with my brother, and getting more and more angered on each like play.
So just the background. I think this is another must-win game for the Steelers. They're in Houston, and then they need a win to make the playoffs. So this is one that there was three teams. I think it was them, Cincinnati, and Houston were all tied in the division. And whoever won, this is basically a de facto playoff game in week 16 or 17. And whoever won this would get into the playoffs, and whoever lost it would be sitting at home. And I don't know what happened. It was either the week before Warren Moon got hurt. And so the Steelers are going into a must-win game with and against the Oilers, and the Oilers don't have their Hall of Fame starting quarterback. So you would think advantage Steelers, right? So the Steelers lose on a fluky play. Nope, they get blown out 34-14. Cody Carlson, the commander, commands his way for 247 yards and 3 touchdowns. Bubby Brister, who was not mopping up, probably could have used somebody to mop up for this mess he made. 15 for 29, no touchdowns and an interception. Is this the infamous Joe Walton? The offense at this point?
Yeah. So that season was goofy, 1990, because they had, we'll talk about 89 here in a minute, but they had gone really far in 89, and you thought maybe they'll build off of that and they'll be even better in 1990. And they'd hired this new offensive coordinator, Joe Walton, and they come out of the gate and they lose 3 of their first 4, and they don't score a touchdown on offense until October. So it's like this dreadful start to the season. But like a lot of a lot of the Tomlin seasons, like they start really slow, but then they get really hot towards the end. And going into that Houston game, they had won 3 games in a row where their defense had not given up a touchdown. And so
this even crazier.
Right. So the defense is super hot. And then even the offense, the week before, they played Cleveland at home and won 35-0.
Oh my God.
That's and so
Cleveland wasn't terrible in 90, were they?
No. And so you're thinking to yourself, I was at that Cleveland game, and I remember coming home. I was so jazzed because we just crushed the Browns. And then I watched NFL Primetime with Chris Berman. And the first thing they talked about, they kind of came in with like breaking news at the beginning, was that Warren Moon had gotten hurt in whatever game the Oilers were playing, and he was probably going to be out for the game against the Steelers next week. And I was like, oh my gosh. So not only is this team on fire, not only is the defense, shutting everybody out, but now Commander Cody Carlson is going to be their quarterback. And so like you're thinking, and the Steelers had beaten the Oilers earlier that season with Warren Moon. So you're thinking that like not only are we going to the playoffs, but if we won that game, Steve, we would have won the division.
Yeah.
So we would have gone in.
It would have been a home game, probably.
It would have been a home game. And back then, if you won your division, you had a pretty good chance of getting a bye week. Like this, they was going to really set up the Steelers for a potential playoff run. And all they had to do was beat a backup quarterback. And then, like you said, it's not just that they, like you said, it's not just that they lost or that they had some bad plays or the defense played well, but the offense couldn't get anything going. Like to give up 34 points to the backup quarterback, it was over by pretty much by halftime.
You got to go to bed early to go to school the next
day. My brother and I
right.
didn't go to bed. What we did, and this is kind of, I don't know why I remember this, but I do. It was winter, right? And we had one of those like old school, not like a gas fireplace, but like a wood burning, fireplace.
Okay.
And you had to keep the fire going. So my dad used to throw like newspaper and stuff in there to keep the fire going. So my brother and I decided to keep the fire going. We would collect all of our Houston Oilers football cards that we had and throw those into the fire.
I bet you took great pleasure on Cody Carlson's.
Yeah. Whenever we found,
even had a card, dude.
Yeah, right. Yeah, whenever we found like Cody Carlson's 1990 score football card and threw it into the fire and watched it burn. That was how we coped with that loss, was burning Houston Oilers football cards. But I was so angry because that season was so up and down, but it was like, finally, this is the team we were meant to be. This was the team everybody thought that they were going to be improved. And all they had to do was beat a backup quarterback, and they lost. And it was to the Oilers. Like if that would have been the backup quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams or whatever, who cares? Like not who cares? It still would have been disappointing. But the fact that it was against the Oilers just made it so much harder to bear.
And the commander. I don't know why. Why did they call him Commander Cody Carlson? And he had, was he in the military?
Alliteration. That's
That's
the that's the only thing I can think of.
He wasn't like in the Navy or something.
I
No.
don't know. I really I'm
You try and block Cody Carlson.
I
out of
just
your-
don't I just don't care.
Well, we're gonna move on to a happier memory, huh, Tim?
Yes.
Okay, that would be 1989, like Tim alluded to the year before. The Steelers, once again, boy, you could almost put this like at the beginning of every season for the Steelers. They struggle out of the gate, but they end up in the playoffs. But the playoffs are in Houston, and this is like Jerry Glanville. I think he had kind of worn out his welcome with Bud Adams by that point, so he's kind of coaching for his coaching life at this point. And Houston's a pretty decent team. They're a good team. They got a good defense. They got Warren Moon. They're not a bad team. But Houston goes 9-7. And the difference is the Steelers won their last 3 to get in the playoffs, and Houston had lost their last 3 to end up in this situation playing. It is a wild card game. And so just to briefly synopsisize, I think they were losing with under a minute left, and Merrill Hodge, Merrill Hodge was really great in like playoff games. He scores a touchdown with 46 seconds left. And then let's see, Rod Woodson recovers a fumble, and here we will play that for you.
This is in overtime.
Yeah, this is now what they are in overtime.
First down at the Pittsburgh 45. And it's to the ground for Lorenzo White. And he's hit for the loss. He fumbled. And the Steelers recover. Rod Woodson on the recovery.
The other great thing about that play that no one would ever really notice, you'd have to kind of look at the replay and look in the background. Woodson picks up the ball. He like has his arms raised like very triumphantly because it's right near the Houston sideline.
I think that's
So
in front of Jerry Glenn.
It's in front of
Yeah.
Glanville and all the Oilers players. He has his arms like up in the air. And in the background, all the Oilers players are walking off the field because they're dejected. Lorenzo White is dejected. He fumbled the ball in this critical situation. And Chris Dishman, who is their cornerback and one of like their
what a
chief,
jerk. Oh,
yeah, one of their chief jerk players, he's screaming and arguing with the referee. He's the only Oiler player who thinks that wasn't a fumble, and he's sitting there arguing. And that made that like extra sweet for me, just to see him whining and crying about it. Like every single person in that stadium knew that was a fumble, except Chris Dishman's like, no, it wasn't. So
I forgot how
brought me
annoying
joy.
Chris Dishman was until you brought that up.
Yeah, you go back later, Steve, and watch the very end of that play where Woodson's walking around. You'll see like over Woodson's like shoulder, you can see Chris Dishman screaming at the ref. It's beautiful.
So I think the Steelers had to drive a little bit, but this is not a chip shot field goal. But the one thing the Steelers have going for them is it's indoors and on turf. And if there's one thing Gary Anderson doesn't miss is field goals in the playoffs indoors on turf, except for that one time when he did 8 years later.
It wasn't for us though, so who cares?
So here we go. Here's Gary Anderson for not a trip to the Super Bowl.
So it has come down to this. Gary Anderson, over his career, has connected 6 times from 50 plus, 6 out of 15. He's hit from 49 on 2 occasions this season. This would win it. And Anderson's kick is good. The Pittsburgh Steelers have upset the Houston Oilers in the AFC wild card.
But yeah, I mean, it's a great ending, and it was kind of the ending of that era. But man, boy, they did, that was a lot of fun. And, I guess, they still Cody Carlson happened the next year. But what a absolute teams that just killed each other over the course of, 10 years. And this was not a respectful rivalry. Both teams hated each other. And I think that carried on probably for a number of years. Like that definitely did not go away for a while. So that kind of ends that era. So we're going to kind of jump around. We'll go to the golden era, as I called it. And this would be 1975 to 1980. And the Steelers and Houston had been in the same division for a while, but Houston wasn't really competitive, and the Steelers had just started their dynasty, like probably like 72, but then, really 74, 75 when they finally won a Super Bowl. So what had happened, which happens a lot in sports, is sometimes the two best teams are in the same conference, so they don't really get to play championship game, like a Super Bowl or a World Series or NBA championship or for the Stanley Cup final, because that's decided before that. And this is kind of what happened to the Oilers and Steelers. Kind of like very reminiscent of how the Steelers and Patriots were in the the tens there, I guess, or 2000s.
Yeah, or even
So,
like the Penguins and Capitals there for a few
yeah,
years.
yeah, very similar to that. So the Oilers, we'll introduce the cast of characters here. The Oilers hired Bum Phillips, who got them back to respectability and probably would have won a Super Bowl if not for the Steelers. And he was just great. Like, he's a character like Jerry Glanville, but not in a jerk way. Is that, like, he has like
Yeah,
this down
yeah.
home Southern Texas kind of thing. He wears a big Stetson and blue jeans, and he's just a generally overall nice guy who's a good football coach and seems like a genuine person. And he has all these great quotes. So I'll read you some of them. I guess there was a practice where, like maybe a training camp, or Earl Campbell, who was their big power back, didn't finish the mile run. Why they had Earl Campbell running a mile? Why they had Ray Matthews or whoever whoever was their offensive lineman running a mile back then? I don't know. So he said, I guess somebody from the media asked him, "Oh, aren't you worried about Earl Campbell?" He said, "Well, hell, if it's third and a mile, we won't give it to him, but we're going to give it to him the rest of the time." So that's a great answer.
Nice.
Or the harder we played, the behinder we got. Another classic. I don't mind people thinking I'm stupid. I don't want to give them any proof. And my personal favorite, there's two kinds of coaches, them that's fired and then that's gonna be fired. Now, the Oilers did lose two times in the AFC Championship game. That would be 1978, 1979. Both those years, the Steelers won a Super Bowl. And it's just kind of like the Patriots. Like, the Steelers were good, but the Patriots were better. The same deal. The Steelers are the dynasty, and the Oilers are just the team that's not quite as good that the buzz saw that they run into. So, in 1977, there's a game called the Briefcase Game, and I did not know anything about this until I researched this. I had never heard of this, so I looked it up on the Steeler. They do an Asked and Answered by a gentleman named Bob Labriola, who writes for them. So in 1977, the end of the 14-game regular season, and the Steelers were 8-5, the Bengals were 8-5, and the Oilers were 7-6. Boy, it very much sounds like 1990, doesn't it, Tim?
Yeah.
And so the Steelers were to play the 7-6 Chargers in San Diego, and the Bengals were to go to Houston to face the Oilers. And the Oilers were already eliminated at this point from playoff contention. So if the Steelers and the Bengals both won and went to 9-5, the Bengals, so obviously it's a 14-game season still at that point, the Bengals would make the playoffs based on their better division record. So that meant the Steelers needed to beat the Chargers and then count on the Oilers, who had nothing to play for, to beat the Bengals. And that combination would give the Steelers the division and the title over the Bengals. So the Steelers do beat the Chargers. And then Houston beats Cincinnati 21-16 in the Astrodome to send the Steelers to the playoffs. So the Steelers, in appreciation for the Houston's professional approach to this meaningless game, meaningless regular season finale, they gave all the Oilers players and coaches briefcases, which just seems like an odd thing to do. But hey, it was the 70s. What are you gonna do? So, going to 1978, there's a regular season game that the Steelers win 13-3, but Donnie Shell hits Earl Campbell so hard it causes a fumble. If you go back and watch this, it's like one of the hardest hits in NFL history, and it helps the Steelers win the division. So, I mean, it's crazy. It's just like, and Earl Campbell, like I said, was a ginormous running back, and Donnie Shell's a safety. He's in the Hall of Fame now. But I mean, my goodness, he just absolutely, like, Earl Campbell kind of breaks through the line and gets spun a little bit, but to hit Earl Campbell like that and cause a fumble. And I think Earl Campbell at that point had already had 41 yards. And I think he had to come out of the game. He did not play after that because he did not have many yards or play after Donnie Shell hit him. So
You had to have a lot of courage to hit Earl Campbell, period, much less hit him at full speed.
well, there's that highlight against the Rams where he basically hits a guy in the chest and the guy goes, and it's like a linebacker. The guy goes flying
Yeah.
5 yards back.
Yes.
So that's another classic 70s highlight that you've seen a million times. So I guess that's 1978, the first time the Steelers play the Oilers, and they win 34-7 in the AFC Championship game. So not much of a game. Bum Phillips, like I said, he wore that Stetson, that giant 10-gallon cowboy hat. It actually got stolen after the game. There's there's video of it. Somebody runs up and some idiot Steeler fan. And actually, I don't know if it was Steeler fans or just fans in general. They all sent him he got a bunch of Stetson hats out of it. People sent him a replacement.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, I wonder if somebody in their home somewhere in McKnight or up in Wexford has a Stetson hat. That's Bum Phillips Stetson's hat. Don't tell anybody.
Also,
So,
a lot of gift buying in this era.
yes. Well, we apparently it's a good-natured rivalry. It's not the bitter
Yeah.
rivalry that it would become in the 80s. It's definitely a very
Respectful. Yeah.
Yes. So that brings us to probably the more controversial part of this. I don't know, part of the rivalry. In 1979, the championship game, and the Oilers were probably the second best team in football, and the Steelers were definitely the best team still, although kind of in a downward trend. We went over this in a podcast a couple months back. Terry Bradshaw actually had a great game. He was 18 for 30 with 2 touchdowns and interception. And the Oilers do lose 27-13. But the controversial play is a catch by Mike Renfro. And was this this was early in the game, wasn't it? Second or third?
It's a little later in the game. It
Yeah.
would have if this
It
counted.
would have made it a 1-score game, right? Or tied it.
No, it would have tied it.
A minute and a half remaining in the third quarter. The Oilers 6 yards away from a tie. It is Renfro, touchdown, or is it? Well, we're going to see it on the replay, and we'll be able to decide whether or not Renfro got his feet down in time. It was a tough call, and this might be a spot where an instant replay would be important.
Let's see if the feet come down now. He's got the ball. He does clearly get inside.
It is a touchdown.
No question about it.
It was not called one, but there's no doubt that was a Houston touchdown.
Well, they haven't made a final decision in the end zone. They're still down there talking about it. Now, there's no question about this. He's got control. He has both feet down clearly in the end zone. It is a touchdown.
Of course, the officials did not have the luxury that we enjoy of seeing that instant replay. The man on the spot didn't see it, so he couldn't call it. And now the Oilers are denied a touchdown.
And so obviously a minute to go in the third quarter, that would have been a tie game going into the fourth quarter. I mean,
Right.
would Houston have won? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. The Steelers were pretty good in the fourth quarter, especially Terry Bradshaw. And they still did win by 2 touchdowns. So maybe the Steelers only win by 1 touchdown. I don't know. You never know. And this what I would say is one of those plays that ended up. When did instant replay come in the NFL? Was that 85?
Yeah, it was like mid 80s. You're right.
Yeah,
Mid-80s.
so this is probably one of the biggest plays that ushered in instant replay
Yes.
for the first time before they got rid of it.
And to be totally fair, Steve, that's a terrible call. That was a touchdown.
Houston, they had a pep rally for their AFC Championship loss. Steelers won their 4th Super Bowl. Houston actually the next year got rid of Pastorini and brought in some guy named Ken Stabler. Ever heard of him, Tim? another a Hall of Famer. Bud Adams fires Bum Phillips in 1980 after going 11-5 and losing the playoffs to the Raiders. I mean, getting fired after going 11-5 and basically being the second best team in the NFL, that's a pretty rough way to go. Chuck Noll, for his part, goes on to coach till 1991 and has won 4 Super Bowls. And I do believe Bum Phillips still has 0. Anyway, moving on to an era that both I and Tim are more familiar with. And once again, there's might be some overlap between this and the Jerk Oilers. But I think as this era went on, it faded a little bit more from jerk to these are just two good teams, So in 92, Bill Cowher's hired. Now, Jerry Glanville has been fired in 89, and they hire a guy named Jack Pardee, who is kind of a nice guy, like the good cop. But Jack Pardee's mistake is he hires Buddy Ryan and has Kevin. I think Kevin Gilbride might have already been there, but bringing in Buddy Ryan to coach your defense is probably a poor choice on his part.
Well, it's a good choice for making it a good defense, but it's a bad choice if you want any kind of like, I don't know,
team chemistry
teamwork.
or
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so neither team in this era wins a Super Bowl, but both appear at least one Super Bowl. Like I said, Bill Cowher's first win was against those Oilers, and in Houston on a fake punt.
Royals to kick. No, fake, big fake, first
Great
down.
Great call by Bill Cowher.
Warren Williams stretches to the 1-yard line.
So they were losing.
Yeah.
They were losing at the time. I think it was 14-0.
Yeah.
And I missed that play because we were losing to the Oilers again in Houston. And even though there was a new coach, it was like, okay, here we go again. And I had left the room for some reason because I just, and my dad, I remember this. My dad calls me, yells from the other room, come back in. The Steelers just did a fake punt. And I remember at this point, my only context for football is Chuck Noll. And I'm like,
it's not happening under Chuck Noll.
well, I don't know that I even knew you could do a fake punt. Like, was that against the rules? You know what I mean? Like, that was just fake punt. What?
In another game that Tim remembers very fondly, 1992, the Oilers 20, Steelers 21. This is a pivotal game for control of the division. It's a back and forth game. Warren Moon gets concussed. You don't get to say concussed a lot. And early, and guess who comes in to play quarterback for the Houston Oilers, Tim?
The Commander
Cody Carlson. So you were at this game, Tim. Were you having flashbacks? Were you worried when the Commander came in?
I was.
Why did you hurt? You were like, why did you hurt Warren Moon? No.
Yeah.
The game on the line. Steelers by 1. 6 seconds to go. A 39-yard attempt. Del Greco.
I think that reaction that you saw there was almost like this release of just, oh my gosh, this is a new era. The mediocre, sucky years are finally over, and we just won this huge, massive game against this hated rival. The other thing I'll say about that was that it was about 2 weeks after the Sid Bream slide.
Oh, wow.
So I think, again, you combine that with all the years of COR letdowns, and I think that reaction you saw was just a release of excitement and energy. And I've been going to COR games since 1987. I think the only other game where I saw people that excited was the 2008 championship game when Troy made that interception against Flacco and returned it all the way. That's
crazy. Yeah.
That's literally the only other time I've seen the people in the stadium just go that insane. It's a regular season game that not many people will remember, but I'll never forget. I still have the ticket stub because I kept it all these years because it was such a memorable game.
So moving on, and we're going to sum up two games at the same time here. It's kind of like two games where they're blowouts one way or the other, but there's one thing these games get in common. So in 1993, the Steelers lose in Houston 23-3, and that's in week 13. And I remember they just got blown out, and I think Neil O'Donnell got hurt at some point and had to bring in some guy named Mike Tomczak, right?
Yeah.
So fast forward 3 years later to 1996, and the Steelers are the ones this time doing the beating, and they're up 30-16. Actually, it might not have been at that point, but they have a lead in the first half, and So the one game, I think it's just after an interception or something, Tom Zach gets in a fight with a defensive player.
There's Tom Zach on the ground.
Oh, I see. Ripped his helmet off.
And then
slugs him.
All right, look at this. That should cost him big money. That's stupid.
The hockey night isn't until Tuesday, right?
That's ridiculous. That is classless football.
I mean, so you're the 1993. You're kind of, okay, it's Buddy Ryan. You're kind of a jerk team. Maybe it's just a Buddy Ryan thing. So let's go to 1996 and see if things have changed at all with our friends down in Houston.
As we are down to the 2-minute warning, now they start up after the flags all over the field, and we could have a tag team event here, Beasley.
That was Tom Zach and number 31, Marcus Robertson going at it.
That's what started the whole thing here, Beasley.
Well, there's Marcus picking up the ball.
Running into Tom Zach.
Uh-oh. And Marcus thought that was a bit much. And, oh, man, he's dragging him by the helmet.
Personal foul. Unnecessary roughness. Number 38 is disqualified from Houston.
It's funny that in both times it's framed by the referees and the announcers that the defender is the bad guy. So, I mean, the defender in both cases definitely was in the wrong, but Tom Zach also wasn't just like standing there doing nothing. So,
well, the defender did run into him in 96. The other one, I think, was after a pass rush or something.
Yeah, but Tom Zach also threw him
he's
down
throwing
to the ground.
punches. Yeah, they're both throwing punches.
Yeah.
So Mike Tom Zach, not afraid to pick a fight with a Houston Oiler.
No.
So, okay, that's enough of that, right? Well, in that same game in 96, we apparently didn't have enough fighting. So who do you think this would involve, Tim? Maybe a big defensive lineman or a linebacker or a feisty wide receiver, right? Those are the guys that are going to get in a fight. Nope.
Right. Shane Edge goes out of the end zone, takes a safety rather than risk a return.
Another fight, Don.
Yeah. Got a lot of guys.
Shane Edge got two right crosses to the. This is unsportsmanlike and ridiculous.
Yeah, Shane Edge not only thought he could run a minute 40 off the clock, also thought he could connect punches with a guy wearing his helmet. So
and shoulder pads.
And shoulder pads. So Shane Edge did not have a long Steeler career, but boy, we'll
it
always
was 4
remember him for
weeks.
that.
I don't know what to make of all that, except for that's it. That was it for Shane Edge. I don't know if he punted anywhere else. I don't think so. As for Buddy Ryan, he's most remembered in Houston for punching Kevin Gilbride during a game against the Jets. Kevin Gilbride actually became offensive coordinator with the Steelers. Do you remember that, Tim?
Yeah, we covered that in our history of the offensive coordinator episode.
Yeah. A lot of crossover in this one. The Oilers won that one game 23-3, but the Steelers, that was the 1993 game. Steelers still make the playoffs at 9-7. The Oilers actually won the division in 93 at 12-4. But both of us lost to Kansas City and some guy named Joe Montana. We more or less lost to them because DJ Johnson kicked the Kansas City player in the head and Mark Royals got a punt block. So maybe we're so used to playing the Oilers, we decided to play like them when we played Kansas City. So not our finest hours there. So in 94, things start to change. They fired Jack Pardee. They hired Jeff Fisher. Bill Cowher's still the coach. And I think at that point, the mentality started to change. Jeff Fisher does have in common, like Jerry Glanville, he was the team's defensive coordinator for a couple years and then the interim coach. And then I guess is what Bud Adams likes to do. He's like to make his intern coaches head coaches. And, is Jeff Fisher a good coach, Tim? I mean, definitely not a bad coach, but
they were almost always competitive with him as a coach. So,
and in this era, I will say this, they went through 3 cities in 3 years from 1995 to 1998, and they were either 7-9 or 8-8.
Yeah, that's impressive.
I think who were the quarterbacks? Did they have Billy Joe Tolliver? No, I think they had Carlson. They definitely had Chris Chandler.
Yeah. And then
they
McNair.
just had,
yeah.
before McNair started. Yeah,
It was Chris
really.
Chandler. You're right. It was Chris Chandler.
So then in '99, like we said, they make the Super Bowl, the Titans, but they fall short by 1 yard because in '95 they had drafted some guy named Steve McNair. But another more important things happens in 1995. Bud Adams decides that after years, he like every time a team leaves town, it's over a stadium, it seems, and he wanted to remodel the Astrodome, and the people in Houston didn't because they had already remodeled it and paid their taxes to remodel it. But now he wants a whole new stadium because he's Bud Adams and he's a little nuts. So he decides, well, I'm going to move the team to Nashville. The problem is Nashville doesn't have an NFL stadium, and they need to build one, and it's going to take a couple years. And so now they're stuck in Houston for like 2 years, 2 or 3 years. It wasn't like when Cleveland left, Cleveland was gone in like 1 year. There was no long, this is going to be 2 seasons. And as soon as he announced that, they just like, everybody in Houston stopped going to the games, and the attendance was really, really bad. So basically, they ended up moving a year early. You remember that, Tim? Remember they actually left a year early and moved to Memphis and played in the Liberty Bowl. And there was a game in 1997 where they played in Memphis, and 3/4 of the fans were Steeler fans, and it was the largest crowd of the Titan of well, they're still the Oilers because Tennessee's such an oil producing state.
I forgot that when they first moved, they were called the Tennessee Oilers for a couple of years. I totally forgot
like
about
1
that.
or 2 years, yeah. And then I think 97 they finally changed their name to the Titans.
Yeah.
The Steelers go to the Super Bowl 30 in that period. Neil O'Donnell happens. Yeah. In 1998, I remember there was a game 41-31. I think it was a blowout game where Eddie George finally had a good game against us. And I kind of knew the Steelers were very much in trouble. Another thing that happens from 97 to 2001, not a lot of people, I didn't remember this. The Titans actually won, Oilers/Titans won 6 in a row against the Steelers. The Steelers did not beat them for like two seasons, 2.5 seasons. So,
yeah, I remember that we often lost to McNair in that era. Often.
Yeah. So McNair's getting good. They got Eddie George. They got a guy named Frank Wycheck as like a hybrid tight end, kind of like if he played in the offensives now, he'd be like George Kittle pretty much.
Yeah.
But in 2000, there's a game. The Titans actually win this 23-20. And this is a funny game because I know you remember. Were you at this one, Tim?
Yes.
Oh, geez. My condolences. Cordell Stewart is not the starting quarterback. It's Kent Graham. But they put him in, and he rushes for a touchdown, and the Steelers are leading late. And do you know why they're leading late? Because Neil O'Donnell, who is now playing for the Titans, has thrown an interception. And you figure, oh, everything's going well. We're probably going to, it's a close game, but maybe we'll win it. But what happens is, was it Jason Gilden who hit Neil O'Donnell? That was really the mistake they made was they hit Neil O'Donnell and hurt him. And that meant Steve McNair had to come in. And you figure, well, Steve McNair's got a bruised sternum. He probably won't be able to do too much, will he, Tim? Huh?
Yeah.
His first 2 passes were bad, but then he kind of settled in. And he hit like his next 2 or 3, and he, I think I forget if he threw a touchdown to Wychecker, but he threw a touchdown like with a couple minutes left to go to give the Titans the lead. And Cordell, then Kent Graham gets hurt, and Cordell has to come in. So there were literally 4 different quarterbacks played in this game. And Cordell like only completes 1 pass, but he's able to rush enough to get us in the field goal range. But unfortunately, Chris Brown is our kicker. So his kick of 50 yards is short and no good.
The really impressive thing about that game was you said McNair had a bruised sternum. That was against Kansas City the previous game. And he actually ended up in the hospital. And he told his mother and he told Jeff Fisher that he was done. He was like, I'm not playing football anymore because it was that bad of an injury. And he just couldn't. He was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And his mother actually talked him out of it. She's like, if you want to quit, that's fine, but don't go out on somebody else's terms, right? And
or
so
don't do it in the middle of the season. Yeah,
that too.
Yeah.
But I mean, and so he makes the trip to Pittsburgh, and they dress him, which was a shocker that they even dressed him because he was in the hospital. He was in a hospital bed.
Yeah.
And they dress him, and he doesn't play, of course. And then when O'Donnell gets hurt, the story was Fisher looked at him and McNair just winked and got his helmet on and then goes and beats the Steelers with like a 75-yard drive. I remember sitting in that game just like throwing up my hands like, we'll just never beat this guy. Like we're just never going to beat him.
In 2001, the Steelers finally break the 6-game losing streak, and this is in Heinz Field. And Plexico Burress makes an unbelievable catch. I remember this game too. Like Cordell had a really good game. That was that 2001 season where Cordell was really good. And then I think later in that season, or maybe it was right. This was the Steelers 34, Tennessee 24. This was in Nashville. They finally got that stadium built, huh, Tim? Now they're building a new one. Can you believe that? I guess the taxpayer in Nashville are going to pony up, unlike the ones in Houston. Well, they ponied up eventually, but
they did. Everybody will.
Yeah, yeah.
Whether they want to or not.
Yeah. So he has a great game. The Cordell has a great game, and they hold off to win the Titans. And actually, for once, this is the answer to your question, Tim. Will we ever beat Steve McNair? Mike Logan makes a nice interception that's of Steve McNair at the end of this game. So, and the Steelers have won 2 in a row against the Titans for the first time in probably 4 or 5 seasons. So there, we did get the best of McNair in that one. In 2002, this is another blowout. Like we're getting blown out. We got blown out a lot by Tennessee.
Yes.
And Tommy Maddox is having a good season, but this game not so much. And this happens towards the end of the third quarter.
Maddox in trouble, gets it off to Antoine Randall.
And Gus, Tommy Maddox is down, and he has not moved. Ooh. That is scary.
That is scary looking.
So at that point, Tommy Maddox had been having like this resurgent season and had gotten the Steelers back in contention. And now they were in separate divisions. This is like a separate divisions at that point, but this was still a big game in the AFC. And Tommy Maddox got hit by, I think it's Keith Bullock, and he actually got what they call it, spinal concussion. And he was actually paralyzed for a short period of time until he finally was able to regain feeling in his, extremities. And he walks around, and I mean, he's okay for the most part. But that was a scary moment for Maddox. And I've heard people say, oh, the Tennessee fans were cheering and not very classy at that point. I don't know. I wasn't there. So that brings us to 2002, which is that same season. Now we're playing the Titans in the playoffs, and this is a divisional round playoff game in Nashville. And it's a tightly contested game between the two teams. And the Titans are in pretty close field goal range. And this is, of course, sudden death overtime. And they are about to kick the field goal. Joe Nedney is their kicker, and he's going to eliminate the Steelers and end their season. Right, Tim?
31-yard field goal by Nedney to advance to the AFC Championship. No! Nedney got roughed. Nedney misses, and then a penalty flag down where he kicked the ball.
It's running into the kicker, number 20, defense, 5 yards.
Dwayne Washington
beat down.
Now, what that replay doesn't do justice is when that happened, all these fireworks went off for 5 minutes. And it was the best icing that you could ever hope for. And he had missed it. And what had happened was Dwayne Washington, as he was diving in, fell in front of him. And I'm saying then he stepped into him. You can say maybe Washington, who was on the ground at the time, not in the air, on the ground, slid into Nedney's plant leg. But Nedney pulls the biggest flop this side of, European soccer. I mean, it was the biggest dive I've ever seen in the NFL, and the officials bought it. It was ridiculous.
It was such a terrible way for the season to end because it's like, oh my gosh, he missed. We're going to get another chance. and then it's like roughing the kicker. I mean, I'll say two things. One, yes, Nedney flopped. He even joked about it. He's like, "Oh, I should have won the Oscar," or whatever his quote was. I will also say, like, what the heck was Dwayne Washington doing? Like, you weren't going to block that kick. You just weren't. Like, he just did this desperation dive. I've always hated that, like, where somebody gets that penalty and
It had
like,
no effect on the play.
it had no
really
effect
didn't.
on the play. Just he's either going to make it or he's going to miss it. You're not not going to like
Unless
rush
you're
around
there
him.
when he's about to kick it and block
Yeah.
it. That's yeah. And
Well,
here
if
we
you get-
have.
and if you're
we
going to do
also have
that,
the video of him making it.
well, so if you're going to do that, dive in front of him.
Yeah.
Don't dive at him. It was
Well, I think he did. He slid
No.
just like when he hit the ground, he kind of slid, and then he was close enough that where Nedney. I always felt Nedney leaned into him.
I think it was a flop. I think he Nenny embellished and he got the call. But if Dwayne Washington should not
It's
been anywhere
a yard
near him,
in front of him, then nothing
Yes.
is called.
just you weren't going to block it. There's no reason to do that. Just let him kick and let him miss or make it. You're not going to block that kick. So I blame Dwayne on that as well.
Well, here's the highlight of him actually making the kick. This is
He makes this one, and Tennessee advances to the championship game.
And I think Bill Coward is telling Ron Blum, you cost us a game by calling that penalty. Boy, Bill Coward is upset.
Yeah, Bill did kind of run out of there, huh?
Yeah, he ran up to the referee and like did like the two fingers like in his chest kind of thing. Like and I mean, again, I get it. I get why Cowher was upset, but at the same time, like Washington dove and the kicker fell over. I mean, it's kind of a textbook penalty. And again, I was very angry at the time. I thought it was totally unfair. In retrospect, I think that Dwayne shouldn't have been anywhere near the kicker.
Why
That's
even
just
give
me.
the official the option of calling that?
Yeah, that too. I mean, you could also say that it was like incidental contact, and that because they've done that on punts before.
Because like, what's to stop a kicker now? Oh no, the kick's going left, or even not. Just go run into somebody. I mean, how is that any different? Go find a player that's in the line and just run up to him and fall down.
Yeah, the spirit of the role is there to keep a defenseless kicker who's got his leg up in the air from getting injured.
Yeah,
that's the spirit of the role, and that's why they have like the 5-yard version and the 15-yard version. But it's like it's still a judgment call because, like you said, it could be that the kicker just ran a few steps up and collided with somebody, or it could be that the guy was rushing at him and took a cheap shot. So it's a judgment call. It is what it is at this point, I guess.
Well, the Steelers lose. That's kind of the end of the rivalry. In my mind, that's the end of really the rivalry.
Agreed.
Yeah, and what had happened was the teams played each other every year from 1970 until 2001, and they were in the same division, and that was the AFC Central. And actually, way back when they were dividing it up, when the Steelers had to go from the NFL to the AFL. This division was fought for by Dan Rooney, and he actually had Al Davis wanted Houston in, I guess, the AFC West or whatever. And Dan Rooney said, if you don't do that, we're going to walk, like put them in the AFC Central. So Dan Rooney really wanted this team in his division.
That's kind of funny. That's one of those weird geography things because Houston is more west than Kansas City.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I guess he figured they could have the Kansas City rivalry and we'll start up a rivalry with Houston.
It worked out.
Yeah. And then in 95, they added Jacksonville. So we had like the largest division there for a while. I think we had the most teams in our division.
6 teams, yeah.
Yeah. And the NFL was completely realigned in 2002 by Dan Rooney. So the reason this ended was because of Dan Rooney. And so the Houston moves to the AFC South, which has Indianapolis, who else? Tennessee. Indianapolis, Tennessee / Houston. Blah 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 blah. Who's the
Texans, Colts.
Yeah, the new Texans, because that's when the new Houston came in,
right?
In Jacksonville. So
yeah.
So old Houston and new Houston are in the same division. Actually, the Steelers, believe it or not, lead this series 40-17.
Wow. I didn't know it was that one-sided.
Yeah. Even with those 6 wins in a row by Tennessee. Yeah. There's been some stuff that maybe could be considered kind of controversial since the Tennessee Titans have left the division. In 2008, the Steelers get blown out 31-14. Remember Lendell White and Keith Bullock stomping on the terrible towel?
Yeah.
I mean, if this is such a curse against the terrible towel, then why didn't we just beat them in the first place? But I digress. In 2011, the Steelers won 38-17. This is one of Ben's 5 touchdown games. So fun times. He threw for 5 touchdowns in that game, if you didn't figure that one out. In 2013, there's actually some NFL history. There's the quickest score in NFL history. And you say, wow, the Steelers must have been really good at scoring. And no, what it was the kick returner for the, the Titans was Darius Renard. And he was standing like right on the goal line. And he caught the ball with his hands outside of the goal line. And then instead of just running for it and getting what he could get, he pulled the ball back over the goal line and took a knee. And so that is not a touchback. That is a safety, Tim. So,
yeah, 1 second into the season, the Steelers had scored
2 points. But they ended up losing 16-9 to Jake Lockhart. Ugh. Ouch. That's a rough one. So, I mean, just a great rivalry, a lot of fun, a lot of things, a lot of people, a lot of Hall of Famers in this one. I do miss it. I do miss the old Houston games, but we play Tennessee this year, but it's just not the same playing them once every 4 years or so, or it's just not the same as Baltimore or Cleveland or Cincinnati. So
yeah, I agree. I miss it. It was a lot of fun, a lot of different eras of this, a lot of different iterations of it. And I miss it too. And you're right, it's not the same. There's just nothing really there anymore in terms of anything to talk about. So
yeah, I mean, there's a couple blips there after, not really much of anything. Yeah, I wonder in the AFC South if Houston has quite the rivalry with Jacksonville or Indianapolis, or or well, you would think they would have it with Tennessee since they're in the same division, and Tennessee kind of stole their team. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all the new people listening. I hope you're enjoying our podcast. Keep word of mouth. Keep liking us on your podcast services, and check out our website. There'll be tons of fun links and stuff on there from all about the Steelers, Oilers/Titans rivalry. And once again, thank you so much, and God bless.